Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Welcome to I don't even know. We are kind of got days left. Can you believe it? It's been an amazing festival so far. You guys have been amazing. And thank you for joining us again. We are having our this is our first session for today. And I'm sure Lily's giving you a whiz bang tour and kind of giving you an idea of what's coming up. We've got quite an exciting jam-packed day today. And today we welcome George Amponsah. Have I said that right? I said any name more than 4 letters long gets me stressed, So it's not just you, it's any name. And I can't, am I hearing you? George, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Sorry, pronounce your name properly. Let me get that right. Let me put some respect on your name. Say your name for me, sir. Let's pronounce your name. Let's get this
Amponsah,
pronounced.
you pronounce it perfectly, Simone.
Did I? Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. I feel good. I'm feeling good for myself. For once in a change, I'm really bad with names. Everybody knows that. Lots of people know that I always call them by the wrong name. So I apologize. It's wonderful to have you here. You're a filmmaker. You straddle across scripted and unscripted as well. So I'd really love to hear about how you do that. And you've got a film on at the moment on Amazon Prime called Gassed Up, haven't you?
That's correct.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Before we kind of jump into it, let's hear a little bit about you. Give us a kind of whistle stop tour or kind of some of the highlights of your career from where your interest in kind of getting into the industry into where you are now. And I can imagine you've got quite an illustrious career. So let's get it, kind of the highlights.
Okay. I went to art school in 1989 at University of East London, and I studied. Well, I went there specifically because I had heard that they had a good film and video department, and specifically they had good equipment. So I went there. I did a degree there, and got my hands on all this filmmaking equipment, Super 8 cameras, 16 millimeter cameras, the video technology of the time, which was SVHS and
You're
Umatic.
old. You're old. You're showing your age. You're old. Properly old.
You might have noticed
Properly
this.
old.
You might have noticed these hairs on my chin. I haven't noticed any hairs on your chin. I'm pleased to
No,
say.
not at all. I shaved. I shaved before I came on. But you kind of like, so you were at the kind of wet.
So
So
that's
you,
how I started. I was just obsessed with it, and I was making my little films and just whatever. Because I was at art college, you could make experimental films. So I was making films which combined all of the different formats I could get my hand on: Super 8, 16mm video. I used still photography. I was obsessed with taking still photographs and darkroom printing, black and white printing. And by the 90s, I decided I wanted to get into the National Film and Television School. And this was after making a short film with a bunch of friends, and 2 of whom were in the NFTS. And they were in the sound, they were on the sound course. And I was so impressed with their overall knowledge of filmmaking that I thought I want to go and learn what they've learned. And so I eventually managed to get in on the documentary directing course. So that was 1997. Uh,
wow.
from the National Film and Television School. I graduated in 2000 and started trying to make some sort of career in the film and television industry, specifically the television industry, which was hard. It took a while to really get anyone to trust me. I felt there was a bit of a view in the TV industry, certainly in documentaries, that even though you come out of the National Film and Television School, they weren't convinced that you could work to the sort of rigors of
Standard,
television,
yeah.
being, the
Mm.
schedules and the working with the team. And anyway, by I think roughly about 2001, I managed to get a gig doing a BBC Storyville, a documentary,
Wow,
which I
that's a
made
big
about.
one.
Yeah, it was a big one. Yeah, and
Was that
it took.
your own idea, George? Was that your
Yeah,
own idea?
it was, Simone. Yeah, it was. And basically,
That's it.
I'd gone into a dentist, and as I do, I was reading the magazines, waiting to be seen by the dentist. I was reading I think it's Cosmopolitan or Marie Claire, and not because I'm particularly interested in fashion, but I like photography. So I was looking at the photographs, and I came across an article about these Congolese people involved in a fashion cult called the Sapeurs, and it's a cult of fashion, and they're called sapeurs, and it relates to an acronym of SAPE, which means Société des Ambianceurs et des Personnes Élégantes, and that means Society of Mood Enhancers and Elegant People.
Oh,
And
wow.
their figurehead was a Congolese singer called Papa Wemba, and he elevated the dressing up in fashion and haute couture into the status of a religion. So they regarded fashion, haute couture, in the same way that I guess Catholics regard Catholicism, and it was a religion of the cloth, and there's a Congolese word or a Lingala word called Kitendi, and that means cloth, the religion of cloth. Anyway, we made a film called The Importance of Being Elegant, which eventually found its way onto BBC Two, Storyville. So that was my first, outing, I suppose, in television. After that, I managed to. It was difficult, but I've managed to find a little bit of a niche working on a lot of the sort of Danny Dyer's Deadliest Men, Donald McIntyre's Toughest Towns, Vinnie Jones' Deadliest
Okay.
Gang, Ross Kemp, etc., etc. So I was doing that probably for about 10 years, certainly through the noughties. And it was, that was, I suppose, in some ways my day job. It was also a cutting teeth exercise. I loved it. I loved traveling to all of these places. I went to places like, I did something on kidnapping in Mexico City, taxi scams in Prague, all kinds of things. And, so I traveled all around the world, New Orleans, and
can I ask you, sorry to jump in, did those experiences, it sounds like they really gave you the opportunity to kind of cut your teeth and kind of give you kind of what is one of the highlights of that time as you were kind of growing in your career? And how do you think it's helped shape you or helped kind of giving you the foundations for your storytelling? Because I want to move to Gassed Up and hear a little bit about Gassed Up and kind of the journey that took, because I know that as a scripted project, I can imagine it took a while to get to screen, yeah?
No, there's no particular highlights that stand out to mind, but I would like to mention, say, everyone's probably knows Danny Dyer from EastEnders and some of the game shows he's in. And I found working with him was a highlight because he's actually one of the most professional people that I've worked with, as well as being just this incredibly entertaining character. So when the cameras weren't rolling, he just seemed to be the same sort of personality that he was when the cameras were rolling. And the thing I always say about Danny Dyer is that he would do things when, you'd say, well, can you do this piece of camera? And you'd give him the piece of camera, he'd learn it in about 3 minutes. He'd come and deliver the piece of camera exactly as you wanted it. And then you say, okay, can you do it again just for safety? We'll get another take. And he'd do it again and add a little bit of some bells and whistles onto it. And, you'd be thinking, wow, that's really great. It's really good. And then, a few weeks later, you'd get into the edit suite and you'd notice some extra things that he was doing, which you didn't even notice at the time he was doing, which in the edit suite, you're thinking, wow, great. We can do something with this. It's fantastic. And, he was one of those people I just found my head was constantly nodding in that direction. Whereas there's some people who will remain nameless that I've worked with on screen, presenters, personas, where you get in the edit suite and your head's more like this kind of thing, and you're thinking, how can we fix this? So that would be a highlight, I'd say, working with Danny Dyer.
Yeah, and it kind of obviously, like you said, kind of that appreciation of being quite of authentic on and off screen. Tell us about our new film, Lily. Can you cue up? Let's get a little trailer, and let's watch a trailer from your new film.
Sorry,
Do you want to tell us?
can I just say, I mentioned Danny Dyer. I've got to say, look, in terms of highlights, because there's quite a long period of time. Can I just mention, I also worked with Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh, Samuel, what did you work with Samuel L. Jackson on? And what was that like?
Enslaved, that was on BBC.
Oh, Enslaved was amazing. I watched that. It was fantastic.
And that was an incredible experience. He's a really lovely man. He was like we'd say Uncle Sam. He was genuinely really like an uncle figure. He was protective. He was, and the scary side of him, which he brings as part of his persona on set, is not who he really is. Because once you get past behind the cameras and all the produce and all that, he put an arm around me. And so I really appreciated that. And I just appreciated coming out of a filming experience with someone who I revere and that he seemed to quite like me at the end of it.
That's insane. How many times did he motherfucker you? They like motherfucker, motherfucker. How many times did he say motherfucker during the shoot?
He
Because
said
that
a
man.
lot. He said motherfucker a lot of times, but it was a lot of the times when you say, "Look, Sam, can we do another take, please?" And motherfucker, I just gave you that shit, and it was just kind of funny. He said he said that a lot of the time in LA he gets stopped by people who just want to be abused by him, so they can go away and say, they can have their Samuel L. Jackson call me a motherfucker story.
Okay, so hold on. Some people are saying that they can't hear me. Also can't hear George just after Swain speaks. We're all good here. Maybe log out. All right. So someone is having some sound issues. So not muted. Definitely not muted. No, I'm not. So Palace, maybe Lily will sort you out. And so how did you get involved before we show the film? I mean, that film was sensational. And really beautiful film. And you worked with Afua. Is it Afua House was involved in that film?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're big fans of Afua. I think she's quite amazing. Tell us, how did you get involved in that film? How did that film come to you?
That was funny, really. It's just I have to give a shout out to God, my memory. Who who got me involved in that? It was oh my God. It was through a friend of mine. And
No
she
matter if
just
you don't remember the name.
well, she just got recognized for a BAFTA. It's just my memory, Simone. I've got so much.
Oh, is
She
the lady for the
who does
African?
Black Archives, yeah.
Yes. I can't
Uh,
remember her name as well.
no,
But yes, we gave her a shout out. But she does an African archive of films and libraries, right? She's been archiving African film and African content for a while. Is this the lady? I can't remember who you're talking about, but I do know who. I can't remember her name like you, but I do remember who you're talking about, and she's quite amazing. We've kind of given her flowers on this platform a number of times for her work. So she was the one who got you involved in that film, yeah? Yes,
yes.
that's it. Thank you, June.
June
Thank you.
Giovanni. God, thank you.
Thank
Yes, June.
you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So big shout out to June Giovanni. She was contacted by someone and they were looking for a Black British documentary maker. And back then, it wasn't that long ago, but I think there was still a bit of a scarcity of Black British documentary makers who have got some stature, have done some things. And luckily, June put me forward and, I got the gig.
Yeah. And was that quite a dream job? What was that like? I mean,
It was a dream job.
Bill Jackson, the
It was
topic matter. My
It was a
God.
dream job, Simone. It was a dream job up until the reality of actually doing it set in. It was nothing to do with Simone. I mean, sorry, it was nothing to do with Samuel L. Jackson. It was nothing. He was lovely, but there's all sorts of producers and the money people, and people who've got a bit of an agenda and they've got their own people that they want to support. And Samuel L. Jackson ended up having a big problem with those people, to be fair. But because they almost
What was the challenges in terms of what the stories are and the way you wanted to tell them? What were the kind of God? You can't give us that little tip. You got to kind of bring us, chop us, spill the tea a little bit, man. What was it? Was it without going into details? Obviously,
something about the transatlantic slave trade, and and it was an amazing story. And Sam and went back to his roots, as did Afua, but there was someone who was running the show and the money, who had a bit of a different agenda, I suppose, who wanted some emphasis, who seemed to think there was some valid comparison between the African American experience of slavery and the Jewish experience of the Holocaust, and it just got a little bit murky at times.
Okay. Woo! Moving on swiftly.
Are we moving on swiftly? Okay, I thought we were going to get into the nitty gritty. You said, even though we're not saying nitty gritty these days.
No, but I mean, like, I suppose that's the challenge when you're telling stories like that. Who owns the narrative, and how you kind of balance that, and how you kind of navigate through. Lily's going to show the film. We're going to show the trailer in a second. But how do you navigate through when your position on that? You was directing, right? So how do you navigate through? How do you find a balance of what the production company wants, and obviously what the kind of online talent want, and how they want to tell the story? How do you find?
I'll tell you how I did it, Simone. with honestly speaking on it, by meditating every day, by remaining conscious, by staying in touch with people who can keep me grounded and keep me sane, by remembering to try to respond to situations rather than react in the moment, by remembering to be in the present moment constantly, you know, and to remember that I was engaged in something that was fun, that I was realizing my dream, and that, you know, you can be on a film set sometimes and yes, you know, you're involved in something there's millions of pounds attached to it and it's important and everyone wants to get to where they're going and to get those 5 scenes shot in that day, and it can become very target fixated. But to just remember that you're all part of a team, you all want the same thing, and you're all engaged in something that is a real privilege, you know, to be a part of. And that actually, regardless of the end result, you're actually making a film. And this is a great thing to be doing. And there's every reason why you should always have a smile on your face, in spite of the fact that it is hard, it is challenging, and it is stressful, and there's a lot of pressure.
I think that's such a beautiful, and I think it's so beautiful, beautifully said. And I think that lesson should be applied to everything we do. That sometimes we can get caught up in the doing of it and forget the pleasure of what we're doing and how privileged we are. And even just the fact that I'm sitting here talking to you, how privileged am I to be spending? I've spent 2 weeks talking to amazing, immensely talented people like yourself and trying to be present in that and really enjoy that. So I think it's a beautiful reminder with whatever you're doing, that sometimes it's important to stop, be present, and enjoy the process of it, and don't put too much pressure on the end result, because the end result will be the end result. We'll get there anyway, right? I mean, I think that's a really beautiful reminder. Let's move on to Gassed Up. We've got about half an hour left. Guys, as always, please don't forget to put your conversations, your questions in chat. I'm in the comments bar, and I know that Palish, you've been Palish is a fan of your Supers. He loved your film. He was just saying that he loved your film, your Supers. So he's a big fan. And I think he also knows somebody that you might have known at Dick Fontaine.
Yeah, you know, God rest his soul. My dear friend Dick Fontaine, my mentor, one of the people who inspired me to pretty much dedicate my life to this thing, filmmaking. So,
and he's always
head of documentary directing at the National Film and Television School, who
wow.
I first met in 1996. You know, when I arrived there to do an induction course, and we got talking, and as you know, I quickly found out that he directed a film for the BBC called A Hip Hop History. It was an arena special. I think it was shown on TV in about 1985, and that was the first documentary that I ever recorded on VHS, and must have watched it about 20 times. Not because I love documentary, but I was a hip hop kid in the 80s. So any information we could get about breakdancing, about graffiti, about body popping, then we would watch it. And as Brit kids, because you know, there was a whole generation of us who were obsessed with this culture coming from New York called hip hop. Anyway, it transpired that Dick Fontaine directed that film. So needless to say, it was just love at first sight. And I think it was mutual. And Dick, God rest his soul, he passed away last year.
Okay, sorry to hear that. Yeah, the greats are going out there. The great ones are going. Lily, let's put up Gassed Up. Let's kind of get, because you are traditionally, I think most of us know, you're a documentary filmmaker, and this is your first. Am I right in believing that this is your first unscripted feature? I'd love to know how the journey. But let's have a look. Let's have a look. Oh, can't get my words out. Let's have a little look at the teaser or the trailer, and then we can chop it up afterwards. Go, Lily, go.
Bands. Everybody trying to hate on me. Tell man, fuck off. Man got paid. Yeah? Man got paid. But oh, you can't give your big brother a hug and say thank you, though.
Thank you.
You treat this like a job, you can have anything that you want.
Do you want this kind of money in your hands?
Hey, Sparks, come on stage, my bro. Make some noise. It's Sparks, you don't want to see flames. Two gassed up when we enter the place. It's a fucking robbery. I gotta get paid.
Where's the stuff from the jewelry shop?
Let's go.
I don't care if every single one of you dies. I want my fucking jewels now.
Now's not the time to be running out of gas, you know, bro. We gotta be focused on what we're doing, Ash.
I'm 14. I shouldn't be hungry.
You got a big weight on your shoulders. You carry it fucking well, bro.
This shit does go south, Ash.
I'm not fucking kid going away for life. They're just fucking kids, man. What do they know?
Has it got something to do with you? Get off me, man. I haven't asked you. What is it that you want?
You know, one day, maybe I could have my own thing.
Wow. Thank you, Lily. Gassed up. Give us the, I mean, obviously we've watched the trailer, but give us the overall premise of the film.
Yeah, the overall premise of the film is a young man who gets involved with a moped gang and thieving with this gang in order to try and support his impoverished family. He's in a one parent family, and his mother's has got problems with addiction and sort of was often absent, and he thinks he's going to support his family by committing crime, and he gets so more and more embroiled with this sort of one of his colleagues in the gang who's connected to, I suppose, organized crime, and he gets more and more embroiled in it, and before he knows it, not only is he in danger himself, but he's also put his family in danger. But I'm pleased to say there is a redemptive ending to the film. So it's somewhat a cautionary tale, but there's also I wouldn't say a happy ending, but I'd say a redemptive ending.
Before we get into it, I just have to, because I am who I am. And so I have to ask this question to get it out, and then we just get it out and we can move over. What's with the kind of, I'm a little tired, and I think I saw it on Amazon and haven't watched it for this reason. I'm a little bit tired of the same kind of repetitive stories, particularly around black men. Why this story? We seem to be telling the same stories over and over again about a black man involved in crimes and impoverished stories, and mums are addicted. I'm a little over it myself. What brought you to this story? Why tell this story? And that's just my own personal, but I have to get it out because we're not going to be able to have an honest conversation unless I do that bit first. Yep.
I know what you mean, Simone. It was, Gassed Up was one of several projects that I've been trying to get off the ground since around about 2016, following the documentary I made called The Hard Stop, which is a documentary about the friends of Mark Duggan, who's the man who was killed by the police in 2011, which resulted in the UK riots. So, I mean, that's a documentary story. That's really what happened. And, I don't know if you've seen The Hard Stop, but you could say that that's also somewhat a stereotype of young black men involved in gangs and crimes and in some ways redemption, because those friends of Mark Duggan, if you look at The Hard Stop, you see them go through a transformation. You see them go through an arc. They've come from this place and they arrive at that place. And, as far as I'm concerned, I know what you mean, but I identify fully. I don't come from that background myself, but I identify with young men who might be involved in that. I'm making a panorama at the moment, a BBC panorama about Chris Cabba, who was the man who was shot by police in 2022, by armed police, who was shot in the head with his hands on a steering wheel. Now, in the course of, obviously, with the police officer is being investigated, is being charged with murder, and the court case looking into that police officer is about to begin in October. But in making this documentary, we've somewhat got to look at who Chris Cabba was, you know, God rest his soul, and what he was involved in. And he was involved in a group of young men from a certain part of South London. They're a drill collective, you know, 6, 7. You can just look at them up on Wikipedia, and in one paragraph it says they're a drill collective, but also known to the police as a street gang involved in crime and drugs and firearms. So, you know, these are documentary stories, and the reason why I say I identify is because I've come from, I suppose, a broken home, if you like. You know, my dad wasn't around. My mum was in and out of our lives, and as a result, I went to a combination of children's homes, foster homes, and boarding schools. And there was a time when actually I kind of could have gone in a wrong direction because of certain people I was hanging around with, a meeting, who became a sort of like a surrogate family, and presented an opportunity to almost like a solution to this problematic that I think a lot of us have as Black British people, especially when we're younger, which is, how do I navigate this world where I don't feel it's a level playing field? I think things are stacked against me. And, you know, you look at the people who are, I suppose, are the leaders, you know, never mind the police, but the actual establishment, the politicians, and you think, well, they seem to be circumnavigating the law themselves. They're not, you know, we look at the Conservative government that's just left office, and well, they're doing what they're doing to make money, and they seem to be able to get away with it. They're not following the law themselves, so why should I? So it's something I really identify with, and that's my identification with a story such as Gassed Up, and stories such as you know, The Hard Stop, and even the BBC Panorama I'm doing at the moment about Chris Cabba.
And the thing is that I respect that you kind of have a niche and you've kind of done a lot of films in that genre. I mean, that's slightly your specialism, and like you have the story. And actually, absolutely, I believe that all these stories need to exist. I suppose I think it's the off balance of the stories that we get on screen, compared to the other types of stories, and why, like you said, that you had several stories that you're trying to get away, but this seemed to be the story that was kind of taken. And given that we recently did a podcast talking about the same issue, is it race, rights, and representation? Given some of the challenges around representations, I'm a mother of a young Black boy, and he's got dreadlocks, he walks down the street, and people automatically assume he's in a gang and all these kind of things, and that's partly to do with the stories that we keep telling about our Black men. So do you think that there's more of an appetite? It's easier to sell a story like that, because you said you had several stories.
You know what? I don't think it's easy to tell any stories, whether you're Black or white, but especially if you're Black. You know, it's in terms of getting a film out in the cinema and getting it, you know, on Amazon, and getting it advertised on the side of buses. It is so difficult, and it's getting harder. So I'd say that first. Second, I would say I agree with you. You know, it's probably easier to make a film about a young Black man who's involved in crime, who's, you know, on the wrong side of the law, is possibly part of a gang, etc., than it is to make a film about, you know, a young Black man who's attending a private school in, you know, somewhere in the outskirts of London, and, you know, who's wants to try and get into Oxford and Cambridge, but specifically wants to be in the rowing team, you know, and therefore in the Olympics. Now, what's wrong with that story? Could be a great story, but see how hard it's going to be to actually get that film funded. In fact, see how hard it's going to be to get a film,
any film
funded, basically. But yeah, there is a sort of boxing, and, you know, with Gassed Up, we mentioned my friend Dick Fontaine earlier, and one of the first things he talked about when I first arrived at the National Film and Television School was smuggling in your agenda. So you're given an opportunity, you're given a brief, right? George, you can make this film, and the script is about a kid who's involved in street crime, moped crime in Southeast London. We think we can sell that because, actually, some of you might remember, around about 2015, 2016, 2017, the newspapers every day were filled with stories about moped crime. It was a news story. Right? and these almost like these young, almost like highwayman style outlaws snatching phones out of people's hands and going and selling them off in, you know, wherever, in Japan or whatever. That's still happening. There's a resurgence now of crime. It's no longer being committed on mopeds. I think they're now using these motorized scooters. And again, people are getting their phones snatched. When they said, well, we think we can finance this film, I thought, right, it's an opportunity for me to smuggle in my agenda. And my agenda
was, yeah, what's your agenda?
My agenda was to show a young black man, not just as almost like a two-dimensional cutout of what we've seen time and time again, involved in crime, and he's but in 3 dimensions, maybe even 4 dimensions. So you see what's in his subconscious. In Gassed Up, you see, you know, a certain part of the film is about his dreams. There are dream sequences, and I was so excited by the opportunity to make a film where you see what a black person is dreaming about, what's in their subconscious, you know, and how his subconscious is trying to tell him that you're in danger, what you're doing and the path you're going down is wrong. And you know, the struggle he has, and eventually he kind of, you know, he figures it out and comes out, and he becomes, and it, for me, it's a kind of like, the story is again about something which I'm very passionate about at this point in my life, which is about consciousness. So I've talked about unconsciousness and dreams, but consciousness as in taking time out to breathe, rather than being gassed up all the time. And you say, I've got to do this, I've got to get this, I've got to, actually, let's just take time out to breathe and just be. And, you know, some of you people won't have seen the film, but actually, if you look at the last sequence in the film, it relates to that whole thing of just stop,
Pen and breathing,
take a breath.
Sorry to cut you. I mean, I haven't seen the film, and I'm being really honest. I haven't seen this because I saw the trailer. I said, I'm tired of seeing films like that. But now I've met you and we've spoken, I feel I'll revisit that and go back and watch. And there's a lot of content that I just refuse to watch. And particularly in my household, I've got children. I don't think that they need to have the images, but I understand that these stories are important to be told. And there's loads of stories, and these stories are equally as important to be told as much as other stories in our community to be told. But I would be remiss and I wouldn't be honest and authentic if I didn't have that conversation with you, because that was my automatic when I saw the film.
Which I understand. Can I mention something as well?
Please.
I got a text message this morning, and I was determined to talk about it. And as part of my research for Gassed Up, because I've come from documentary and from real life, I researched a documentary that was on the BBC, BBC Panorama, a few years ago. Well, probably around about 2017, and it was about a moped gang, and specifically about one young man who was involved in the moped gang. They've all got masks on, so you never get see their identity. But the main figure in this documentary is extraordinary, because you see him and he says, look, I'm just doing this because I kind of just feel like I've got no other choices. In order to get what I feel I need to get, I've just got to go and just grab it off people because no one's giving it to me, right? And then by the end of the documentary, I'm just saying what it is. By the end of the documentary, because they you know, someone says to him, well, what do you feel you're good at? And he said, well, I'm really good at driving. That's why I'm so skillful in a moped. And so they take him to a Formula One aptitude test, which he does. And the examiner, or the tester, says that this young man is in something like the 99 percentile of the top skill set of people who can actually drive motor cars. And it was amazing. And he then formed a bit of a relationship with this tester. And I think they're doing some sort of business together where they're creating an app for young people who can't afford to be paying thousands of pounds every week to get the training that Lewis Hamilton got, but could do it on an app and could therefore go forward. Anyway, my point is, he sent me a text message this morning saying he'd just watched Gassed Up. Can I read out what he said?
Please do, please do.
He said, hi, George, how's it going? I watched Gassed Up not long after we spoke. We spoke a few weeks ago. The film was really good. I could relate to it well. It was fun and engaging, quite emotional too. The actors done a good job. The slang for me was a bit old school, outdated, and the racing seemed familiar, but perhaps a little artificial. Other than that, I really enjoyed the film. 8 out of 10 from me.
Listen, George, listen, no, I want to be clear what I'm saying. I believe the film needs to exist. I'm imagining, and I know it's going to be an amazing film. I just think that these stories, I have a young boy. He walked out the other day. He was just sorry, this is not what this conversation is about. We're going to get back on track in a minute. I have a young black man son. He's 17 years old. He went into a shop the other day, walked out of a shop. The security guard came back and assumed that he had stolen because a black guy with dreads. These stories perpetrate. So this black guy who wants to be a rally driver, who feels that he can't be a rally driver because life won't let him, these stories make him feel that he can't, in my mind. So when we keep throwing out these stories, and I understand that you've got a niche, and actually you've been telling stories like this forever, so it's not necessarily just, and you understand and recognize the challenges of telling wider stories. But the more that we keep telling this one type of story,
Yeah,
I don't think it's very healthy. And there's so many stories. The story that you just talked about in that young man in that panorama, I want that story. I want to know how he became that, and then he became a rally driver, and then his success. I want more stories like that.
Still involves crime and starting off in a place of.
But it takes us to a different place. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about, and I'm sorry. I want to know how the journey, the transition from, like, how did you get that to life, and the journey, because a lot of people I know that work in the documentary space also really, really want to work in the drama space as well. I see I've got a question as well that I'm gonna get to. And was it because you're so well known and you've kind of you tell these really hard and gritty stories? Was it that why it was easier to tell this story, or to be given the space to tell this in a similar story in a kind of drama way? Is this how this came about? Love to hear how Gassed Up came about.
I think the way Gassed Up came about was really as a direct product of the Hard Stop, because
Right.
with the Hard Stop, we were very conscious about making film. Yes, it's about a current affairs news story. It's about a very topical story, and it's a documentary about something that really happened. The shooting and killing of Mark Duggan by police whilst unarmed, and the subsequent riots in North London, which spread across London and then across the rest of the UK. But in telling that story and making that documentary, I was very conscious of using all of the storytelling conventions of a drama, and that's something that I'm a great believer in, and something that Michael Moore said about documentary making, and he said, "Don't make documentaries, tell stories."
Yeah, I
the
love
word
Michael.
documentary is just a label. It actually sounds kind of boring, documentary. Well, no, it's a story on screen. And if you accept it's a story on screen, well, then how do stories get told? How does a story get told successfully? It gets told successfully by having a beginning, middle, and an end, set up conflict resolution, a 3-act structure, characters who go through a definable arc over the course of that story and the duration of that story, whether it's 10 minutes or 90 minutes. And so we went out of our way to adhere to those principles with the Hard Stop. And I think we were successful. It was nominated for a BAFTA in 2017. In my opinion, it should have won, but I'm probably a bit biased in that. But, and fortunately, I'd say specifically Rupert Preston from Vertigo releasing is a big fan of the Hard Stop, and invited me into his office and said, "George, would you like to make a drama about another news story, which is, moped crime, about a young kid who gets involved in moped crime, and you could do it like in the Hard Stop, and make it almost like a documentary, and can make it really gritty and real." And we talked about some of our films that we love, gangster films, crime films, like the Pusher trilogy, which is a film, 3 films, Pusher 1, 2, and 3, which are set amongst the Copenhagen underworld, not black people, people in Denmark, excuse my and I just love those films. Pusher 1 is great. Pusher 2 is even better. and Pusha 3 is decent. It's not a bad film, and I will say in that respect, it kind of outdoes the Godfather trilogy, because
Wow.
Godfather 1 is brilliant, Godfather 2 is excellent, and Godfather 3 is just, I don't know what happened there, you know.
They lost the plot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So he then said, yeah, and that's how it started. And initially the budget was supposed to be, you know, not more than that. I think, how much was it? Definitely not, somewhere in the region of about 500,000 to 750,000, less than $1 million, you know, which is a micro budget. We couldn't get it made. We wrote a script, we had a few drafts, couldn't get any interest. They kind of languished from 2017 to 2020, 2021. I think I would hear from Rupert maybe once or twice a year, you know, have you got any, you know, new ideas about Gassed Up, or we thought about this casting idea and blah blah, but nothing really happened. And suddenly in 2021, Rupert got in touch and said there was this group of producers who were quite hot. They just come off the success of a feature film called Boiling Point, starring Steve Graham, set in a restaurant and all shot in one take, and they are interested in the script for Gassed Up. And so, you know, went from there, and you know, I started working with this new group of producers, and one of the first things that they seemed to be quite happy with the script as it was, but I could see limitations in the script, and I said, well, you know, we need to do a rewrite on this, and they agreed to that, and that's when Taz Skylar got involved, who's one of the members of the gang in Gassed Up. He's also, as well as being an actor, he's a writer. And so he then came in, and between us, we did a new draft of the script. Amazon became interested at that point. We kept on, basically, you know, we were now getting notes from Amazon, and that process lasted about a year until Amazon said, we're happy with it, let's go. By
How
then,
long
it had gone up to 2.5 million.
Wow. That's amazing. How long did it take you to get to screen? So that's like a kind of 2 or 3 years, 4 years?
Yeah,
That
from
sounds right.
2017 to 2022.
Wow. And that's kind of usual, isn't it, for kind of featured dramas? Because like I went mainly in TV, so that sounds, my God, mind blowing to me. In film, that's quite,
You know, so there's 2 other scripts which, as far as I'm concerned, are very, very strong, possibly stronger than Gassed Up, which I've also been trying to get off the ground since 2017, and it's just so hard, Simone. And you know, recently I'm not going to go into details, got a knockback on one of the scripts and of some funding, and that was just the first bit of funding needed to activate the rest of the funding, and then it'd all be in place, you know, for a 3.5 million budget. And that didn't come through, although it seemed to be something that was almost promised to come through. But it, you know, it's a tough environment, and it's tough times. And you know, that script is, I mean, that script started in 2016, really. It's now 2024, almost the end of 2024. But you know, you know, and there's a feeling of, and it's a good script now. It's getting better and better.
I'm cheeky, but I need to ask, is this, I can't help myself, can't behave myself, but is that script also a kind of black urban crime story? The script that you're trying to, that you're having troubles with, is it staying the same kind of sweet spot? Is it the same
Black,
kind
it's
of?
black and white, and it's, you know, look,
No, the only reason I ask is whether
you know,
that was anything to do with the story making.
You know, labels are very clear. It's not, to me, it's not about an urban crime story. It's about institutions, institutionalization. It's about you know, people think the Shawshank Redemption is a prison movie, but it's not. It's about the real prison. What it's about is about the prisons that people construct in their own heads and in their hearts. Those are the hardest ones to break out of, the ones that don't involve physical bars. And so that's what that script is about.
Wow. No, I just wondered whether because it was a slightly different story, whether that was why it was having difficulties getting traction. I wasn't making a judgment about the types of stories. I was just wondering whether, because it might not be set in that similar way, whether it was making it a little bit more difficult. That was why I had asked that question. Do you know what I mean? I think all stories are valid and important to be told. And like you rightly say, sometimes, like Shawshank Redemption is one of the best films. It's one of my favorite. And totally agree. It's nothing to do with prison. It's about his mind, his mindset, and how he breaks free. So I'm totally with you. It's just more my frustration, not with you or storytellers like yourself. The industry's obsession in telling a certain type of story. That's where you'll hear my frustration, not the storytellers that want to tell these stories, because there's still important stories to be told. We just wish we had more variety, so that when these stories be told, they just don't feel like the kind of the shorthand for our community.
What a film that I've wanted to make for so long, and I will, if I live long, I will eventually make this film one way or another. And it's a post-apocalyptic rom-com.
Ooh, that sounds good. That sounds good.
And it is,
and there's story. There's room for everything. All right, Alicia's got a question. I recognize that we're running out of time. We haven't gone to too many questions. Let's go. Palace, you've got a question. Can we see the question? George, are you able to see that question? George, are the cuts of Gassed Up that we can watch on Amazon Prime and Apple TV the same, or are they different director's cuts, as it were? Are you intend with no scenes? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. To be honest, I didn't even know that Gassed Up is on Apple TV. But if it is, I can assure you it'll be the same cut as the one that's on Amazon.
Wonderful. And then just kind of talking about the kind of just raising these kind of important issues. So for you to be able to make that transfer, I suppose it becomes apparent how you were able to make the transfer from kind of documentary to scripted, because you kind of worked within the sweet spot or something that you were already respected for or known, to be able to produce those stories and documentaries. So it's not so much of a far leap to be able to produce them in drama. That's kind of the essence.
Yes,
is that the advice you would give people that want to kind of cross over or straddle over?
I think my advice to people who are trying to cross over from documentaries to dramas is to try not to think of it as two different worlds or two different. If you think of it all as storytelling, then it's not this massive leap. It's the same thing. I mean, right. And I got this advice from my good friend Colton Lee, and Colton gave me a bit of advice when I said, Colton, I'm about to direct my first drama. I'm shitting myself because I've never worked with actors before. I don't come from a theatrical background. And he said, George, he said, you've got to bear in mind, you've got a absolutely brilliant, unique selling point, and that you should convey this to all the actors you work with. And he said, you come from documentary so-called. You come from a place of telling real stories about real life and real things that are really happening. So you come from a place of authenticity. And after speaking with Colton, I did that. Every actor in Gassed Up, when I spoke to them before we started filming, I said, look, I come from documentary, so I've got a good idea of what's real, of what's authentic, of what's real life. So I want us to find what's real and what's authentic about your character and the drama that you're portraying in our film Gassed Up. And every one of them responded really well to that, because that's what all actors are trying to do for the most part. That's what method acting is. It's finding the documentary truth in a fictional, dramatic, performance or portrayal of something.
I know, and a lot of people have said that documentary filmmakers make the best drama directors because of that absolute truth. So, I mean, so you would kind of advise to kind of make sure that you bring that authenticity in storytelling that you would bring to drama. And I think it's a really good point that you make, not to think about just to think about it as telling a story and finding the medium best to tell the story, be it drama, be it documentary, be it comedy, is kind of essentially what you're saying, yeah? So when is tell us about your panorama? So you've got a panorama that you're working on, and that goes out in November. Did you mention that it goes out in November? Yeah,
November.
And then what plans are you kind of? What's the plans after? I can imagine, because court cases happening soon, that you're kind of completely immersed in that project at the moment. Have you got any more plans to kind of do any more scripted stuff? And are you in any more conversations around that?
Absolutely, Simone. Like I say, the scripted, the drums, it is tough. Like I say, you know, you could have been speaking to me in a very different frame of mind about dramas if I'd got the result I wanted from an application that came through. The result came through a few weeks ago. It was a real gut punch, but you know what? Okay, I've got to take some breath, take some time out, and you know, and just okay, let's go again. There is a way to make this film, and you know, I'll say this. I'm sure he wouldn't have a problem with me talking about this. Is you know, because I worked with Steve McQueen on a documentary a couple of years ago called Black Power: A British Story of Resistance, which you can see on BBC iPlayer, which is about the British Black Power movement of the 1960s and 70s and 80s. And Steve McQueen was a producer on that. He also produced, you know, and it was off the back end of his Small Acts drama series. And it's a real story. So I made the documentary, which was a real story about the Mangrove and about Darkest How and the.
Oh, it was amazing. I love that. And the gentleman that played Darkest How, I don't know if you're talking about the drum, but
right.
Yeah.
So that was a Small Act. So Steve McQueen was the exec producer on the documentary film that I made. And after that, you know, I texted him to say something. And actually, I texted him I think he said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm a bit sad because my brother Menelik Shabazz has died recently."
Yeah, R.I.P.
Yeah, God rest his soul. And then Steve, suddenly my phone rang and I saw it's Steve McQueen. So he's come on the phone. He said, "George, how's it going? What's happening?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to get these 3 dramas off the ground. One's called Gassed Up, about this kid. The other's this one, and the other's that one. Okay." And I can't seem to get any of them off the ground. This was before Gassed Up picked up. I can't seem to. I don't know. And I was trying to see if I could angle it and say, well, maybe you could help Steve and use some leverage. And he said, "What do you mean leverage? You know, he's quite." And I said, "Well, you know, Steve." And it's George. And then he spent the rest of the conversation. Well, it wasn't even the conversation. He spent the rest of the phone call pretty much shouting down the phone at me. And what he was saying was, he said, "George, if these scripts are as good as you say you are, then find a way to get them made. There's a way, just find it." And I'm saying, "Well, yeah, but I don't know what's going on with these producers." He said, you've got to find out what's going on, make it your business. And by the time you put the file, I'll never forget that, and I've been playing that back in my mind now over the last few weeks. There's got to be, because I know I've got 2 brilliant scripts on my hand. They're brilliant. So I've got to find a way to get them made. There's no time like the present. You know, we're not here forever, are we? So let's get it going. Let's do it.
And I love that, because I think that there's loads of people sitting in this session with that same thought that they've been. That I think we do a Breakthrough Leaders, and Remy, our coach, the kind of group coach, always says that working in TV and film sounds like this. No. No. So there's a reality about working in this space, and the things that we're really passionate about making. We can't just leave it to somebody to decide that they agree with us, that we've got to be really forceful and proactive to getting it made. So I think that message, like that Steve gave to you, is pertinent to everybody on this call. Just get it freaking done. You know what I mean? Just get it freaking done. Just find a way and get it done. End of conversation. Just get it done.
I need to get a moped and go out and start robbing people's phones.
Maybe don't do that. Maybe take time with that. Maybe that might be a step too far.
That was a joke.
I'm hoping. I was hoping that it was a joke. But no, thank you. It's been amazing. I didn't mean to give you a tough time about the film and the content. It's not about your film. It's just I get more frustrated with the industry and its obsession on telling stories of just these same boring stories. Single mums on crack. I'm fucking bored of that. And anyone, just to that point, if anyone, you guys have to watch Who Cloned Tyrone. I urge you to watch it. Stick with it. Watch, because the first half an hour is really challenging, but after that, it talks to things and it talks to some of these issues, and it's frigging genius, absolutely funny and quite amazing. But that first 10, 15 minutes is deliberately made to piss you off. But if you can get past it, oh, mate, and let me know if anyone watches it, what they think, because that is a serious piece of film and talks about the society that we live in, some of the tropes that Black people often deal with and why. So it's just an interesting, funny look at that. So, George, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't give you too much of a hard time about you know, the topic of your film. I'm gonna watch it. I know it's gonna be amazing. I know all these films are Top Boy. When it came back to Netflix, it took me a minute to watch it, but when I watched it, mind blowing. And Kano, amazing acting. So it's not that I don't love these stories. I just think we get too many of them. That was all. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing how you made the transition from from docs to drama. I think that's really helpful, and a lot of people relate to that and can kind of draw inspiration from that.